Hi, I'm Dave and I'm a volunteer here at Sheffield General Cemetery. So what's in an old cemetery, you may ask? In the case of Sheffield General Cemetery, which is just a mile from the city centre, I think you'll be surprised at what's here. For a start, there's the remains of around 87,000 people buried here between 1836 and 1978. There's listed buildings, Victorian catacombs, a surprising number of impressive monuments, and lots of gravestones, often hidden away in the undergrowth. Birds, animals, trees, and other plants call the cemetery their home too, which is why we're a designated local nature reserve. Volunteers work here regularly to keep the site safe and attractive for our visitors. Many thousands of Sheffielders enjoy the tree-lined pathways that crisscross the site, or relax in the grassland park area, which was once crammed with old gravestones. In the early 1800s, Sheffield grew rapidly. More people, in crowded, insanitary conditions and working in dangerous jobs, meant more deaths. Church graveyards were literally full to overflowing. In 1832, there was a cholera epidemic, which killed over 400 people in Sheffield, and because of lack of space, they were buried in a plague pit outside the city. 2 years later, prominent citizens formed the Sheffield General Cemetery Company and chose to build a new cemetery as a profit-making venture. When the cemetery opened in 1836, mourners passed through the portico of the gatehouse and a pair of iron gates. The gates, and the walls that enclosed the cemetery, protected against illegal body snatching. The first burial was in 1836. The shareholders looked forward to their rewards, but it was not to be, as they'd spent way more than they had planned on lavish buildings and landscape features. They only ever sold a handful of these catacombs, and it took 6 years before the 1,000th burial was sold. As the site had been a quarry, it was easy to dig deep graves to be used as common graves, unmarked mass graves for people who couldn't afford to buy their own plot. In the 1840s, a new law banned pauper burials in unconsecrated ground, and the wealthy and middle-class non-conformist residents of Sheffield still didn't seem to fancy becoming permanent residents of the cemetery. So the cemetery bought some adjacent land and laid out an extension to the cemetery, along with a new access road, Cemetery Road, which you can hear in the background. This land and the new Anglican chapel were consecrated in 1850. The chapel's tall spire is still a feature of Sheffield's skyline. After the First World War, cremations grew more popular, and by the 1950s there were only a dozen burials a year, and the cemetery and its finances were in a bad state. The site became even more derelict, dangerous, and overgrown. The last burial was in 1978, when Sheffield City Council took over the whole site to save its heritage for this densely populated part of the city. But the 1980s were a difficult time for Sheffield. So in 1989, local people formed the Friends of the General Cemetery to protect and ultimately regenerate the site. Soon the Friends became the Sheffield General Cemetery Trust, with local members and active groups of volunteers. Hundreds of people have volunteered over more than 30 years to keep the cemetery alive for the people of Sheffield. And since 1998, the site has been listed on the National Register of Historic Parks and Gardens, as it's a rare example of an intact, surviving 19th century designed cemetery. Today, the Trust owns the Gatehouse and the nonconformist Samuel Worth Chapel, both of which have been restored from dereliction. The Samuel Worth Chapel is a unique and atmospheric events venue for meetings, parties, weddings and live performances. You can see more information on the Sheffield General Cemetery Trust website